And that's sort of the origins of how you had these other companies under different sort of titles, and then you became Finji.
Yeah, well, so many people. So we used to run the equivalent of 3 companies, kind of. Like we had Semi-Secret Software, and then Finji's actual technical real name was Last Chance Media. And up until I changed it last year, we were like a weird, it's called a DBA, doing business as, and we just like tacked Finji onto the end of it. And at a certain point, I actually had to buy my own company. Like I had a lawyer draw up.
It was cheap though. It was like $1.
Well, I'd buy my own company for $1. The paperwork actually was not cheap. It was like $1,000 of lawyer paperwork for me to prove to Apple that I had purchased my own company. It was legit the most ludicrous thing I've ever had to do, just to prove that like I could change the Semi-Secret name to Finji. But yeah, I used to run all.
Then we moved out of state right away, and we technically had to start a new company with the same name in a different state, and now we have to do the whole thing again.
It's awesome.
I'm gonna buy it for $2 this time.
No, I don't have to buy it. I just have to change it. Should be easier this time.
And so Finji was 2014.
Yep.
You guys created this new sort of umbrella. You focused on creating Overland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a mix of things. The very first project was the project we went and ended up canceling. But in the meantime, we had been kind of messing around with some side projects, and one of our side projects was Overland.
So you are developing this game, Overland. It's a bigger scope than you had done before.
Yeah,
Slightly larger.
Yeah, we had never internally developed. So this is part of like sort of the switch was, we were running a mobile studio. Like we made iOS, and we even sent out the Android games. But
And our last iOS game was like obsessively iOS centric. We had like really specifically sat down and tried to figure out what's the coolest thing you could ever do with an iPad. What can you do with the whole idea of multi-touch as a thing? And what if you built a whole game around that, and it was this weird thing where you assumed people would be playing on a big old iPad, and so it could be kind of like weirdly cooperative, and it was fine to have 2 people with 2 hands moving stuff around on the screen.
Hundreds.
Yeah. And it was like, this is so cool. And we put it out, and we're like, now, what else do we put it on now? This thing turned out amazing. We worked so hard on it. And we're like,
nothing.
Literally nothing else.
Actually nothing. Like even then, there weren't even like Android tablets.
Or Surface thingies, whatever Surface is, that wasn't a thing.
And this actually sort of we should probably just talk about this a little bit now. This is sort of thing about sort of our funding sources, but how we had funded the studio before this was sort of using our long tail revenue, which I'm just going to show you just quick. Basically, like you earn a ton of money at launch, and then it just sort of trickles down, kind of indefinitely forever. Like I still make Cannabalt money. It's like $1,000 a month or something of Cannabalt money that still comes in from iOS. So like, I think the game's older than my kid. Like
substantially. It's in
older.
3rd grade.
Yeah, it's 3rd or 4th grade at this point. So like we had always operated on kind of long tail capital. But with hundreds, what ended up happening is we had this really big launch spike, and then the long tail basically disappeared, like pretty rapidly. Like I had all this data of like how not only how our games like had sort of like depreciated, I guess, like had gone down over the years. But I also had data from other teams who had also launched iOS games before us. And I was just like, man, hundreds dropped off really fast. And then I was getting new data from other teams, and they're like, it was dropping off just as fast for them. And like my reaction, I don't know if there's any kids in here, I can't tell. Oh, okay. Okay.
Supposed to be at least one kid.
SHIT word? Yes. Okay. I was like, shit. This money I had thought I was going to have, like these percentages that I had a record for, I was like, I can't afford to make another game.
And
like,
that was
barely
like
paid for
App
development
Store.
on it.
You were witnessing how the App Store sort of
in
changed.
real time. Yes,
Yeah.
like
And we had been watching
it.
it.
Was moving over to free to play, the premium. Like had already been a race to the bottom. Like a number of people who like still complain about the price of Cannabalt, which we like never changed. Like this should be.
Well, we watched it change. Like our first iPhone game came out in 2008 and was a top 10 organic accident thing, and it was $2 because I'd pick a number. Who cares? Yeah. Nobody's gonna buy it. Doesn't matter. And a bunch of people online got mad. They were like, $2. That sucks. It should be more. And we're like, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll do it right next time. And then a year later, we put out Cannonball, and it was $3. And they're like, "This sucks. It should cost a lot less." And we're like, "Oh,
And then
we already did that."
And then Hundreds was like 5 years later, 4 years later,
About 2 years.
2 years later,
something like that.
and that you
In 3
witnessed
years.
sort of the dramatic difference in the revenues on
Yeah,
in the
I mean,
App Store.
Hundreds got a lot of the same
had-
marketing support. It got a editor's choice
Yeah, and it
thing.
had the highest launch month.
Yeah.
Like it was 3-4 times what Cannibal made in that first month on iOS. It was like like $200,000 or $300,000 or something. But like when you divide that up amongst everyone who worked on the game, you're just like, ugh. But then it was like 50,000 the next month, where it should have been that next month like 150. Like it should have been like 65% of launch month, and then it should have dropped 2 to 5% kind of every month after that until it stabilized at like around $7,000 to $10,000 a month for like a year. Like it should have.
And there were a bunch of things happening. There was changes in editorial direction at the storefront, and changes in the way the marketplace worked, and the just like explosion of massive budget free-to-play games. There was a whole bunch of things all going on at the same time.
So, like, right away, we were just like, man, all of our eggs are in one basket. Like, we can't put Hundreds on anything else. We just spent, over 18 months making this game that we cannot do anything else with, which is, like, really terrifying when, like, you have a house, and at that point, we had 2 kids, and we're like, what do we do next? Like, how do we fund more things? And, like, I mean, we had done this turnkey stuff, so it wasn't like we were, like, running out of money, but we were looking to the future, like how can we make something else if we can't pay for the development for multiple people for over 2 years, which is at that point also Adam was like, you're kind of a game developer, Becca, because I was just sort of hiding in the background doing money, and he's like, why don't we just run this thing together? Which is when I, like in 2014, like a year later, I actually became like an official part. Before I was just I really was just like hiding in the background. I'd scrubbed the internet of my image and everything. I like got one like nasty email that came into Adam's like inbox once that like made fun of how I looked, and I was like devastated. I was like 30. I was 30. I was a mom even. I was so upset that I just erased my image from the internet entirely, which is possible. It just takes a little while. And like I was gone for like 4 years-ish, and then that was actually a conversation we had in 2014, which was like 5 months or something after Gamergate. Yeah.
Depends on what part of 2014.
About whether you wanted to be
About
forward-facing?
whether I should be, a forward-facing person in the company.
Yeah, and you decided to do it.
I was like, well, we'd kind of gone through also a legal breakup at that point, so it was like Adam and I had to run this thing together. And I couldn't be a silent partner anymore in it. And I'd done actually Hundreds like design work.
Part of it was just having to decide what to do, because there was a bunch of things that we knew we could do. We had shipped an iOS game that had broken even, which for us, like we didn't take out loans to make it. We bootstrapped it, so it breaking even meant that we finally got paid to work on it after the fact. So there was some operating budget to try to make something else. And we had just done these ludicrous Old Spice web game things with the Kembe Matumbo.
Can't find online anymore.
There's like a Chinese site that has mirrors of them or something. And we had done that. We're like, okay, well, we know we can do that. But we have kids now, and is there like, do we want to keep doing sort of safe stuff that we've been doing? Because we can just kind of keep trying to line up one big contract each year, and then we can just sit around and like probably read a lot of manga or something, like I don't know what, or we can try this thing where I'd been hanging out with this guy in LA who had gotten this thing, and he had hired a bunch of people and was taking like a kind of like rolling some pretty big dice, but
we had never invested in our own project in the way that we were sort of considering it. Like, okay, well, we have like, $400,000 or $500,000 ish at that point, just a little bit under.
yeah, all of our work had been.
What do we do with that?
Yeah, this like so up until this point, like Hundreds was 3 or 4 people all working together, but nobody was paid to work on it during the development of it, and everybody was promised a revenue share when the game came out. And it was all like, we all just decided like, yeah, we can all pay our own bills from old things, so we'll just work on this weird thing together, and maybe it'll be a cool thing. And so that's really, really hard to do on projects above a certain size because they take so long to make. So when we started talking about like, iOS is shaky, we need to start thinking about PC Mac as a platform where maybe we have a little more control, we have direct contact with customers depending on how we approach it.
And you can take it to consoles, which is like a whole bunch more markets. At that point, it was just like Xbox and PlayStation because indies just didn't go to Nintendo. It just wasn't even like a thing.
Make a Wii U game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, well, we want to go here, but those platforms have certain expectations. It's actually kind of tricky to make something that looks and feels like a cute little mobile game and put it on those. So maybe we need to make something that's a little bit like meatier, kind of, in one way or another, that has a little more depth, has a little more, polish or something. We got to try something, but that means probably working on a game that's going to take at least 18 months and could be longer.
Adam was so optimistic.
Very
So
optimistic.
this
I
is
still
the-
am.
So optimistic.
So
about
this
how
is the
long
beginning
Overland.
of Overland, and you create this company. You're going to develop this new IP, Overland, and you're going to fund it yourself. And you had sort of projections on how long you could fund it. Like you had a
Yeah.
sense, and this is like
This
how
is-
long? This is like 3 years ago.
Oh, more.
Longer.
4.
4 years ago now.
Yeah. So at the beginning of Overland, I knew that I could fund everyone working on it for about. Well, I told Adam I could fund him for about 18 months. I actually could have funded it for 2.5 years, but I didn't tell him that. I didn't tell him I had like this.
Didn't matter
extra-
because I wasn't going to make it in
No,
18 months anyway.
Like, this is just sort of
Not
how
even.
because I know how we work. We're all procrastinators at heart. But like even with our budget, I was just like, I'm just gonna pretend like that extra year of money is not there, because like no matter what, I was already going to cut sort of like the monthly burn because I'm really good at stretching money to last forever. So I made that 2 years of money last 3 years and a month or something. And then I have this up because we actually did have to, we had like the end of money, which was really terrifying in 2016, and then how we were going to fund it after that, which is a whole nother story
Just
we'll
to
talk
give
about
us some
someday.
context, like in terms of your burn rate. So when you're talking about a burn rate, what do you mean, and how many people are you
So
paying
this
to get
pays
this
for- yeah.
this game done?
So this pays for me and Adam in our household. This pays for our art director, our audio director, show presence.
We underpay
Animator.
them, but they also get a rev share, so it's kind of a stipend to get them from here to launch.
And they can
But-
take on extra contract work all over the place. And there's somebody else.
Also, to be clear, it wasn't.
PR. I have a PR and marketing help because I can't do it all.
So you were balancing that and Overland and the idea of becoming a publisher, and you stretched this money for 3.5 years.
And we also licensed hundreds to another company
Yeah.
in there and got some revenue out of that. And Night in the Woods was kickstarted. And then we had to also borrow money from a friend.